Hello and welcome to the SNBI is Coming webinar. My name is Paula Hyman from the Ohio LTAP Center. I'll be your technical support for today's webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the presentation today, please type those into the questions box. Our presenter will address your questions at the end of the presentation. Just to make sure everybody knows where that's at, just go ahead and if you want to put a quick hello in there, I'll respond to you. There are 2 items available to download in the handout section. If for some reason you are unable to download those handouts, put your email in the questions pod and I will email that to you directly. This webinar is being recorded. Providing that the recording is successful, a YouTube link and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to all participants and uploaded to the LTAP website. I want to thank you in advance for your participation with that, and I'm going to pass things off to Mr. Mike Brokaw.
Thanks, Paula. My name is Mike Brokaw, and I work for ODOT in the Office of Structural Engineering, and I manage our state's bridge inspection program. And there's lots of pieces and parts that the program touches. What Federal Highway has done this year has changed the federal regulation governing the National Bridge Inspection Program, of which Ohio is one state operating within that program. And they changed the manual for how we inventory bridges. So the change is significant. If you are responsible for any number of bridges as a local agency, as a state department, as a consultant, you have contracts, the next 3 to 4 years are going to be sizable, significant change. And what I'd like to do in the next hour or so is share with you how this is going to affect you and how this is going to affect the country. And I will say my disclaimer here at the beginning is I don't work for Federal Highway. I'm not speaking for Federal Highway. My vantage point is more how Ohio is going to implement the changes required from the national level. And I'll give you some of those federal resources here in a little bit so you can go right to the source. This is the last webinar that, the last SNBI overview webinar I'll be giving. We've been given a few of these since August. I think next month we're going to start doing targeted small bite-sized implementation plan type webinars. So I'll give you the dates on those. If you stay tuned and subscribe to the LTAP email listserv, you should get notifications when those webinars come out. So let's get started. As a bit of an overview, it's easy to get these 2 things confused. So I just want to compartmentalize them for you, and I think it'll help us moving forward. Federal Highway published their long-awaited new bridge inspection federal regulation. They made it available for us to view 2 years ago in draft form. We made comments right before COVID. We published our comments. Every state did. There was thousands and thousands of comments. Federal Highway went through all the comments through COVID and took them a couple years. They edited and they published the new rule. It's the new regulation, the new 650, 23 CFR 650 subpart C. There's a new regulation for bridge inspection. The changes are not significant, and the changes overall make sense. For example, if you're responsible for fracture critical bridges, which the term is changing to something else, if you're responsible for fracture critical bridges, it makes sense that you should attend and pass the fracture critical class. So there's a lot of changes in there that make sense. Now, and it might be difficult to comply because you got to take new classes, but nonetheless, the new rule is not a huge change. It will take some adjustment, but it's not a huge change. It's due on June 6, 2024. I put due in quotes because this is the grace period. You have 24 months to take the new classes that you have to take, to become familiar with the new policies, and there are new inspection intervals for fracture critical and dive inspections. that you have to be aware of. So you have to start inspecting those early so that your intervals get onto the new reduced frequency. So I'll cover all that. And the due for us in central office is to publish a new inspection manual by that date as well. So the new rule is like the umbrella. It covers everything, intervals, training, policy. A second bigger chunk, I said the rule isn't a big change. The monster change, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, is underneath this umbrella within the new rule is something called the SNBI. So there's two major parts, the new rule and the SNBI. The SNBI is the new recording and coding guide. If you're familiar with that 1995 federal manual on how to inventory bridges, what the inventory fields mean and how to do that. The SNBI is a new recording and coding guide, specifications for National Bridge Inventory, and that due date to completely re-inventory all of your bridges, that due date is the federal submission in 2027. So March 15th, 2027 is the drop dead date. We're telling people to be done by the end of 2026. So the big years in which you will be re-inventorying your bridges in asset-wise is 2024, 2025, and 2026. 2022 is kind of like the notice. The SNBI is coming. The SNBI is coming. Be prepared. This is kind of what's in there. 2023 is the learning curve and baby steps towards implementation, but the big push is 24, 25, and 26. Where we are now is we are in the notice. You know, this is coming, the speaking tour, so to speak. We are waiting on Bentley to update AssetWise. And once they do that, and once we test it, we will release those new fields to you to start adding that data. This winter, I'm going to create and release a temporary form for those of you that want an option to start filling out some fields that might be a heavy lift. And that should be coming here in the next week or so. I've got a couple of tweaks yet to do. If we look at overall the SNBI, the data conversion, it is a big data lift. About half of the conversions from AssetWise to the future SNBI are clean. It's a copy paste. Structure file number is going to be structure file number. Latitude, longitude is going to be latitude, longitude. The other half are kind of tricky. They're going to need either a field verification or a plan check. And then some are downright dirty. Some are filthy. A small number, 5 or 6 fields are going to be filthy. So it's a mixed bag. So keep in mind there's two parts, the new rule and the new manual from Federal Highway. The outline of my talk is this. I'm going to talk about the qualifications, talk about the intervals, and this is all new in the SNBI and new in the rule. And then we'll get into the SNBI. The biggest part here I'm going to talk about is the data conversion, that third bullet. I'm going to throw out some numbers. It's kind of a guess, to be honest, but I'll give you some numbers, something to work with, give you an overview timeline, and then I have about 20 questions because we've been doing this kind of sharing past few months. I'm going to share with you some questions people have already asked, and I'll give you the answer. All of this whole presentation, as Paula said, is available for download in the handout section. Also available in the handout section is the SNBI. So if you want to start reading through that, that document is available in the handouts. First bullet here is qualifications. It's largely staying the same. To be an NBIS program manager, you have to have an Ohio PE, you have to have the comprehensive class, and you have to have periodic refresher training. That really didn't change. Some of the finer points, Federal Highway's really gotten into some of the finer points. And comprehensive class, there's no more grandfather clause. The last time the NBIS changed in 2005, we grandfathered a lot of you old timers that were doing program manager duties before 2005. We grandfathered you in. There's no grandfather clause now. So those of you that are still hanging around that still need to be program manager after June 6, 2024, and you're relying on that legacy clause or grandfather clause, you have to take a comprehensive class. You have to take a level 1 and level 2 that we are still teaching, that we offer 3 times a year. Or you can take, if you're a PE, you can take the 1-week NHI bridge inspection comprehensive class for PEs. Refresher training, a lot of questions about refresher training, and I'll get into refresher training later. Team leaders, if you're a team leader, is someone that's doing the inspection, that leads the inspection either by themselves or in a team. And there's 4 ways to be a team leader. I'll show you that in a bit. But notice that you still have to do a comprehensive class and you still have to have periodic refresher training. Comprehensive class rules, there's no grandfather clause. You have to have level 1 and level 2. If you're a PE, you can take that 1-week class. If you are a team leader and you have to inspect fracture critical bridges, there you have to take and pass the fracture critical class. NHI teaches the fracture critical class. They're updating it to the new standards. The NSTM, non-redundant steel tension member, is the new definition for fracture critical. I'm going to keep calling it fracture critical. I just can't get it out of my brain. And once that class is retooled, it will be offered next year by NHI. And one thing we're trying to do here in our office is learn how to teach that class. And we would like to offer that class starting next year as well, because there's a great demand, especially for those of you that have, the dozen or so pony trusses. We have about 60 county engineers that have pony trusses. They need to have this class after June 6, 2024. All right, so 4 ways to the right. To be a team leader, you have to, and there's 4 ways to be a team leader. In that bullet there, registered PE plus 6 months of experience. I don't know what they mean by experience, but what I would guess is that it's field experience inspecting bridges in the field. So to be a team leader, someone in the field inspecting bridges, you have to have some experience in the field. 6 months plus PE, or 5 years of experience, or bachelor's degree, pass the FE and have 2 years, or associate's degree and 4 years experience. So there's 4 ways to be a team leader there. And then you're going to add on to the comprehensive class, refresher training, and fracture critical if you need. The deadline for all of the new stuff is June 6, 2024. Many of you have nothing to do here. Many of you have taken the comprehensive class, have taken the fracture critical class, and you're sitting pretty. You've got nothing to do. Your only question is refresher training. What does refresher training mean? And I'll get into that a little bit. One thing, central office, we have to figure out is how to give you certification numbers. We have to certify you as team leaders. I'm not sure how we're going to do that. That's a heavy lift for our office, but it's still kind of hanging out there. All right, so we have some options for the comprehensive class. You can take the NHI 2-week class, which is $2,000, or the NHI 1-week class, which is $1,000, or the ODOT level 1 and level 2. That's 2 weeks total. It's about $700 total. Those are your 3 options for comprehensive class. There's no more legacy clause option available. NHI, National Highway Institute, you can take the class anywhere in the country that it's offered. We are trying to offer as many of those classes as we can. LTAP's been great to work with, drawing in a lot of those classes. If we look at the numbers, this is from August, so some of you have taken classes now, but consultants, there's about 20 of you. These are like the old timers that got grandfathered in. You need to come back and take a class. It might be beneath you, it might not. You might learn something, but we're not saying you're not competent. We're saying you just don't have this checkbox to meet the national standards. So consultants, that first bar on the left, there's about 20 of you. County engineers, there's about 25 of you. Municipalities, there's 7 or 8. ODOT, there's 7 or 8, and then there's some others. There's not a huge number of people that need to take the class, but it does exist. And you've got a grace period now, about 1.5 years to apply. The NSTM, the fracture critical class, the non-redundant steel tension member training, that's a $900 3.5-day class. And we are working on, Jared Bax in our office is working on teaching this class. So we're kind of working through some of the details there. We don't have all the details, so nor do we have the materials, but we kind of want to, and we're considering offering this class from our office. The refresher training before in the recording in the NBI before, it just said you got to take periodic refresher training, and states decide what periodic refresher training is. In Ohio, we said you got to take one class once every 5 years, and here's the classes that count. That authority has been taken away from us, so to speak. Federal Highway now says they have to approve the class, so they provide the list of classes or trainings that comply, and it has to be a cumulative 18 hours every 60 months. And you have to have that refresher training ready to go June 6, 2024. So it's at 18 hours every 60 months, Federal Highway approved. If you keep asking me, is this class approved? Is this class? I don't know. Federal Highway is holding the keys and they are not answering. I don't know what their plan is or what classes comply. So ask Federal Highway, because that is something that they want authority to decide. If we look at some of our classes that are currently scheduled, we have a lot of the 1 week for PE classes coming up. Next week, we have one in Columbus. We have another one in Columbus in January, another one in Columbus in February. In Lebanon in District 8, we have March. In Akron District 4, we have in April. So we have a lot of the NHI 1 week for PEs. Please fill these classes up. The ODOT Level 1, Level 2, we're going to commit to, we've got a Level 2 next week, and we're going to commit to 2 of these every year. You have to register through LTAP, and Jared is leading the charge on those. NHI Fracture Critical, again, there's none scheduled because they're retooling the class. NHI is. We hope to offer those as many as possible next year and in 2024. And we are, again, looking into teaching these. The refresher training, which most of you have all the questions about refresher training, that is an unsolved mystery. I'm going to submit that for the Netflix unsolved mysteries. I don't know anything about refreshers, so to be determined for Federal Highway. Federal Highway does have a resources page and a frequently asked questions section, but they haven't put any questions in there yet. So that was the training. So many of you have some classes to take before June 6, 2024. If we now transition into the intervals, when I say intervals, I mean how often do you inspect the bridge? Most of what we do is a routine inspection. The initial inspection, this is all new in the regulations. So you have to have that initial inspection locked down and done within 3 months of the bridge being built or 3 months of the bridge being rehabbed. That includes part width construction. Anytime you put public live traffic on a new structure, new deck, new super, new sub, you've got to have a team leader inspect the bridge, make sure it's safe. Ideally, the day before it's open, that would be ideal, but we're given a 3-month grace period. So that is in the law now. Routine, we're not going to change or deviate from our RBI. It's still going to be 12 or 24 months. If you want more information on RBI, we have that policy that kind of came out last year. And so that is something we're living in right now. Underwater, it's been 60 months forever and a day since the underwater requirement came about. There are dive bridges that now will require a 24-month dive. So that is a big update. And the NSTM, which are the fracture critical bridges. There are fracture critical bridges now that must be, by national regulation, receive a fracture critical inspection every 12 months. You might guess what's going to be the requirement for reducing the dive and reducing the fracture critical. It's condition, and I'll show you what that looks like. We have a couple of new inspection types. The service inspection, which would be you're stopping at the railroad bridge overhead and doing a service inspection. You're doing it's kind of a less than routine, inspecting somebody else's bridge when they're fully responsible. And scour monitoring is a new inspection type. Kind of working out the details on the scour monitoring one. All of this starts June 6, 2024. Now I have the same question. Is the beginning of the interval June 6, 2024 or the previous inspection before June 6, 2024 with a new reduced interval? I haven't got that answer. I would assume we're in our grace period now, so start inspecting these bridges in 2023, 2024 to get onto that interval if it's a reduced to 24 or reduced to 12 for your dive and fracture critical. There are, we're not going to do an extension of our fracture criticals, but if you have a super sub and it's a fracture critical bridge, super sub that is 4 or less on the 9 scale condition wise, then you have to do a 12-month inspection. So every 12 months you're climbing the members, you're getting a snooper, you're getting a bucket truck, you're getting into that advanced access, getting hands on. That is a requirement. For dive, there's a reduced to 24 and it's based off condition. Sub, channel protection or scour condition 3 or less is a reduced to 24. And there's an extended, so you can go beyond 60 months if your conditions are 6 and above and your scour vulnerability code says the structure is stable. So if we look at the number of bridges on the local agency, we have counties, there are 94 dive bridges, 78 of them can be extended based off of your current data. Cities, there's 17 dive bridges, 10 of them can be extended. So there's some good savings here in extending should you want, or you can just stay to 60 and do your 24s. Looking at the other intervals for the initial routine, this is any new, replaced, rehabbed, or temporary shoring, you've got to get in there within 3 months. And for your initial, if it's a fracture critical bridge or a dive bridge, you have to do that first fracture critical or that first dive within 12 months after opening to traffic. So the initial routine is within 3 months. The initial fracture critical and dive is within 12 months. That was added to allow for those of you that need to contract out more complex inspections. And there's a little bit of a grace there, but that is in the regulation and that starts June 6, 2024. So this is kind of like the last slide when I'm talking about the regulation. The rest of my slides, the bulk of the talk here is going to be the data conversion, the new SNBI. So we're going from the left-hand side, the recording and coding guide that came out in 1995. Believe it or not, when we submit the federal tape, we still have to convert all of our values to metric units because that was the window in 1995. Think about all the database structures that were available to us in 1995. We far surpassed a lot of the antiquated ways in submitting. So moving off of the 1995 version makes a lot of sense to me. There are some challenges, but nonetheless, we're going from recording coding guide to the SNBI, which is on the right-hand side. We're also going to add in the elements, the specifications for the National Bridge Inventory elements into the SNBI. Those were added to the SNBI. Those are not required for local agency structures off the NHS. So those were not added in as a requirement. They're just added into the SNBI so they don't have to carry multiple manuals. Those are in the SNBI. We got the question, what about SNBI training? Well, this might be the first time you're hearing about this or the second time. And since August till now, I've been on a speaking tour, meetings, webinars, and Teams meetings and the like. This is one of the stops in the speaking tour. There are lots of resources on the Federal Highway website that you're welcome to browse. Also, I have the 2 resources in the handouts to this manual or to this meeting. In December, we're going to start focused monthly webinars, December 13th, and you'll see this invite come through LTAP. There's a webinar much like this one where myself and Omar in our office will talk about how we're going to handle one of the dirty transitions, the rail standards fields. That's a nasty one. So we'll talk about how to do that. January 25th is a webinar on component condition ratings. What are some of the changes we're seeing with those? And Valentine's Day, you can come celebrate Valentine's Day with a webinar on scour vulnerability. You can listen to my voice and hear us talk about how we're going to handle complying with that code. Comprehensive SNBI training, we've been promised from Federal Highway, and I'm pretty sure they're going to schedule this any week now. they promised early 2023 a comprehensive SNBI training. We have not opted for a comprehensive training just because it's such an unwieldy, it'd be a 2-3 day training. It's just too much right now. So that's why we're going to do the focused ones, and we're going to kind of leak this out little bits. So if you hear something about a SNBI training, please attend. You want to hear all the parts and pieces and understand how we're going to do this. So let's open up the SNBI. Let's look in there. And the first thing you might notice is that there's a lot of definitions, and it's kind of tricky. There are new words and there are new definitions. The ones that come to mind initially are the ones dealing with scour evaluation. What is a scour appraisal? What is the scour analysis? You know, all of those definitions matter. If we look a little further, the data looks a little different. Those of you that are working for the state, we have complex interchanges where we have bridges on bridges on bridges, and we have multiple features. There's something in the SNBI that's a little sneaky. It's kind of like, those of you familiar with filling out the element table or filling out the under records, there's many to one. There's many under records to one bridge. This many to one idea filters throughout the whole SNBI. So if we look at this complex interchange, this is in Columbiana County, and we talk about features. How many features, and we're looking at that top bridge, how many features deal with this bridge? Well, we have the inventory route on the bridge, that's a feature. We have one railroad track under the bridge. We have a second railroad track. We have a bridge under the bridge, and that has a route, that has some features. We have another route, and we have a county route. So we have all of these features, and all of a sudden you have seven different layers of every feature needs to be inventoried. Every feature needs an ADT. Every feature needs a clearance. Every feature needs something. So every feature is inventoried. So it might look like, oh, there's only 60 additional fields. Well, you got to multiply that. If for a structure that has multiple features, you have to multiply that by the number of features. So it's not a one-to-one. Converting from asset-wise data to the SNBI data, it's not going to be easy because we can't from central office just copy and paste because of this many-to-one issue. Many-to-one filters into load rating, all the vehicles we have to load rate for. There's many vehicles for one bridge, for example. If we look at superstructure types, and you have 3 unique superstructure types, well, each of those unique superstructure types need to be inventoried. And that could be your main span is different from your approach span, or your main span for the interstate has been widened, or you have culvert spans that have been extended. Those are all unique superstructure or culvert extensions that need to be inventoried uniquely. So each unique span type gets inventoried. Same thing with substructure types. Each unique substructure type gets inventoried. So abutments will get inventoried, and then each change in pier type gets inventoried. The widened portions get inventoried, so on and so forth. So this many-to-one really filters through. All that to say, we can't copy and paste data from asset-wise for many-to-one issues. That is something to be aware of. If we kind of zoom out and look at the data transitions, and each bar here is a number of data fields. And on the left-hand side, there's 54 fields that are a clean transition from NBI to SNBI. And then the next bar is, just by luck, we have an exact Ohio field. So there's 17 Ohio fields that are a clean transition to the SNBI. There's clean transition calculated fields. You don't have any work to do there. There's new fields. There's about 12 fields that are brand new that you have to fill in. And the highest bar, the one on the far right, there's 65 that are not clean. And then you might double that or triple that depending on how many features you have or how many trucks you have load rated. So there's an expansion there. If we look at just a little small portion of that, there are some filthy, dirty, unclean fields that need a lot of effort. And that's what we're saving those webinars for starting in December. the filthy fields, the ones that might take a little extra understanding, a tweaking of our policy, something clearly mapped out for you. So this is kind of like the transition, looking at the data from a zoomed out, how hard is this going to be? If we look at some of the clean ones, the deck type, concrete cast in place, will go to concrete cast in place. So that's going to be an easy copy paste. If you have a corrugated steel deck, you'll go corrugated steel. If you have a wood or timber deck, you now have to determine, is it glue laminated, nail laminated, solid sawn, stress laminated, and others. So depending on your current deck type, you might have to make a decision. What type of timber deck is this? And the others, Federal Highway has expanded the others. So is it FRP, composite, what type of fiber? So it's kind of clean because most of our structures are going to be concrete, corrugated steel, but the timber is not so easy. So just keep that in mind. There's a new field. Federal Highway now wants some inspection notes in there, and there's guidance in the SNBI on what goes in the notes. And they want to know what type of inspection equipment is used at that bridge. Was a snooper used? Was rigging used? Was a boat used? Was a drone used? There's some new ones. There's some not clean ones. This is going to affect a lot of state structures. Most bridges on the local side are rectangles, or rectangles kind of skewed. And it's a simple width times length is the deck area. Well, if you have a ramp coming in or a gore area, you have an irregular deck area. Since the beginning of inventorying bridges, this deck area has been the width times the length. And that's been good enough until now, but Federal Highway now wants to know what is the actual deck area if it's an irregular deck. So you're going to have to do some geometry, some trigonometry maybe, and get that actual deck area and put that in that new field, irregular deck area. So that's coming online. Wearing surface type is really not clean. You've got, some of them are copy paste, others are a little dirty. And what type of internal deck protection, that's a current field that we have, but there's more options within the SNBI. So the epoxy coated is going to go to epoxy coated, and unknown or other are really spread out to stainless, FRP, high chromium, those kinds of options. So these are some of the not clean options. If we look at abutment type, asset-wise on the left, SNBI on the right. Sorry, I didn't say that at the beginning there. Solid wall will go to solid wall, but we have a 5 and a 6, a stub gravity and stub cap pile. Those will then go to stub, and stub cap pile multiple rows. Those will all filter into stub because we are going to be inventory foundation type separately. So there's sparsing, and the jigsaw puzzle needs separated just certain ways. Material type, we're going to be coding material type. So for example, if you have a steel beam superstructure, calling it steel beam superstructure is no longer acceptable. Whenever we roll this out, you've got to define the type of steel. So is it a rolled shape, a welded shape, a bolted shape, riveted shape, or both bolted and riveted? So it's just slightly off enough. You basically have to re-inventory the whole bridge. You know, we can't copy from steel to steel anymore because we don't know if it's rolled. We don't know what type of steel it is. So there's going to be a lot of effort to re-inventory the bridge here. The benefit is you're going to get to re-inventory the bridge. You might find a lot of the inventory was incorrect and it needs to be updated, and now is the perfect opportunity to update. Bends or piers is the same. This is not a clean transition. Cap pile columns are the same, but there's a lot of extras. There's going to be some hard data conversions, like what type of protection is within the substructure, none, or is there an admixture? Is there some sort of passive protection? Foundation types is going to be an especially hard one, so you're going to have to pull plans. What type of piles and are going to be required. More of the not clean details, whether or not the bridge has fatigue prone details, E or E prime, That's a yes or no. And E or E prime details. An inspector that is inspecting bridges that are fracture critical, thou shalt know what an E or E prime detail is. So if you don't know what that is, we encourage you to take that fracture critical class. At the end of that fracture critical class, you'll know what an E or E prime detail is. If you don't, ask your bridge engineer or hop in the inspection manual. There's some guidance in there. Something that we're doing because of the SNBI, because of other reasons, is we are adding fields into AssetWise next to roadway fields. So we've got about 20 fields that we've added into AssetWise. Those of you that are in the inspection inventory world, you've probably seen these. We're going to go live with this roadway inventory updater for all local bridges in March. So March, the second half of March, we're going to turn RIU on. And what RIU is, because part of the federal rule is that we have to marry roadway data and bridge data. They have to match. They have to say the same thing when we make both our road federal submission and our bridge federal submission. Right now, that they're not perfectly matched. And so we are pulling in roadway inventory into the bridge inventory so that you can see the differences and correct the differences. So we're going to start that in March. We've started that. We did a kind of a soft launch for state bridges a couple months ago, and we're going to go live with all bridges in March. And those of you that the roadway inventory doesn't match, the roadway route number doesn't match what's in TIMS, this is going to be a big, heavy impact. For most of the state, it's not going to be, you won't notice it. It's not going to be a big impact. You might notice it on the approval side, the PE approval, but that's coming in March. And if you have latitude and longitude correct and a few other fields correct, you have 5 fields correct, it'll populate 20 extra fields. So it's a good deal. You have 5 fields correct, you'll get 20 of your roadway fields. If you want more information on RIU, every single bridge in AssetWise has a link called Roadway Inventory Updater, Data Improvement Form. You can click on that form and read about the RIU and what to expect. Some more of the heavy lifts in the SNBI are the bridge railings, bridge railing transitions, our legal load configurations and legal load rating factors, scour vulnerability, and work performed. These are all heavy lifts. If we just look at the railings for right now, there were 3 separate eras in which we performed test levels where we physically ran trucks and vehicles into bridge rails to see how the vehicle would respond and how the bridge rail would respond. We started doing that in '64 with NCHRP 230 and 239. The next era was 93 to 2009, NCHRP report 350. And then we're in the MASH era right now, 2009 to present. So every single rail, every single standard rail is tested with these test levels since 1964. And Federal Highway, for some reason, needs to know what test level and what era the railings were crash tested against. Now you might think, holy cow, what you just told me is all brand new. How am I supposed to then code the bridge to know what? Well, we're creating, Omar's creating something simple so that you can inventory the rail correctly, and then it will tell you what the code should be. So if we look at the SNBI, this is the confusing table that is in the SNBI, the test levels on the top right and the description on the rows. And the TST rail, this field should be coded 3503. The DBR rail is 3502. The New Jersey 32-inch is 3503. Not to be confused with the GM barrier is also 32 inches high, a little squattier. That's an I. New Jersey 42-inch high is a 3505. New Jersey 36-inch is an M093. And the single slope 42 is an M095. This is too heavy of a lift for inspectors, to be honest. And so we're trying to make it real simple where you inventory the rail type. And sadly, item 407, which is the current bridge railing type, is unhelpful. It's unhelpful and kind of wrong with the checks that we've been doing. So We're going to scrap that and re-inventory our railings. And by re-inventorying our railings, we will then tell you exactly what that, or we'll actually populate that field for you. So that's going to be that whole webinar on December 13th. All right, there's going to be new component ratings. There's about 6 new component ratings. We're going to do a 9 through 0, which when you think component, you should think 9 through 0, deck super sub, culvert GA. We're going to add bridge railing condition 9 through 0, bridge railing transition condition 9 through 0, bridge bearings condition 9 through 0, channel protection condition 9 through 0. And if you have a fracture critical bridge, the fracture critical members, the worst one, the controlling one, needs a 9 through 0 as well. And if you have a dive bridge, all the underwater portion, that needs a 9 through 0 as well. So we have additional component condition ratings. You'll see those come online soon. And the guidance is different. It's just different enough that we have to kind of retool our entire inspection manual, where this is the inspection manual from the SNBI. Table 20 is what we need to fit in our current guidance. And so if we look at table 20 and spread it out, so here's table 20 spread out, we have to define what an inherent defect is, a minor defect, a moderate defect, and a major defect. That's the severity of the defects that we have to define. Federal Highway has given us some guidance in the SNBI in Appendix C. But we also get to decide, well, what is isolated, what is some, what is widespread? So we have some decisions to make when we update and rewrite the inspection manual. So here's some of the language that we have to define. Defect location, the SNBI is silent on location. And we all know location and redundancy and all of that stuff really matters when we talk about what's a 9 through 0. So we got to figure all that stuff out. Another filthy field is this scour vulnerability field. It's supposed to be similar to that item 113 scour critical susceptibility field, the field that we've been filling out for decades. This one's a little different. We have a term in here called scour appraisal. So scour appraisal has not been completed, or scour appraisal has been completed. We have this field to fill out, and just as a PSA, I'll give you the definition here. Scour appraisal is the controlling or most vulnerable or most unstable answer when you look at the observed scour and estimated scour. So observed scour is what you do every time you do an inspection. You take your probing rod out, you probe, you inspect for scour, you take photos, you take measurements. That is your observed scour. You take your channel profile photographs or channel profile cross sections. That's observed scour. Your estimated scour, you have to have both, observed and estimated. Estimated scour is either a scour evaluation done for ODOT structures. It's done at early design stage, because we got to know what type of foundation, how deep the foundations need to go. So scour evaluations are done early design in a hydraulic report. Those are calculations, or a scour assessment. The scour assessment is a checklist where you take a step back and look at the history of the scour, you look at the history of the bridge, you look at the hydrology, you look at the channel changing, and there is a checklist in the inspection manual from 2014. We're actually adding portions of that checklist into AssetWise to make it easier for you to fill out a scour assessment. And we're adding a screening process, a phased screening process for scour assessments into AssetWise. Documentation is important. So documentation for scour evaluation, what is the check flood, what is the design flood, what is the hydraulic study. So you're doing the blue scour evaluation or the red scour assessment. So documentation for scour assessment is the checklist from the manual or item 113 training. So this might be a big deal for some of you. We are working on our policy and procedures, updating our policy procedures right now. So we should have some helpful answers for you by that February 14th webinar on the scour appraisals. That's a lot. I mean, this could be days and days of training. So no, I'm going to cut it off here and not go into any more details with the SNBI. Also, it's not my intent to overwhelm you. but it is my intent to communicate clearly. This isn't meant to overwhelm you. You don't have to know all this stuff or figure all this stuff out right now. This is just so you know, this is a big deal. This is a deal. And if you're listening to this webinar, you're right on pace. You're right there. You're right where you want to be. There's no need to panic. We're trying to form and make this a simple, straightforward transition. We have a long takeoff. We have a long tarmac, so fear not. But anyway, SNBI is overwhelming. And once you kind of do a couple bridges, you'll get the hang of it. It won't be a huge deal per bridge. Now let's look at some cost estimates. As I said, when Federal Highway gave us their proposed rulemaking, every state in the country and county engineers in Ohio, some cities did, responded. They said, this is good or this is bad, or this is going to cost me $40 per bridge or $100 per bridge, or it's going to take an hour per bridge or 10 hours per bridge. Some states said it would take the entire state $200,000 to implement. Other states up to $18 million to implement. Time to implement, some states said 24, some said 48 months, some said 10 years. So the nation, we really don't know the impact. We don't know. We don't know. My guess for Ohio, this is adding local, adding state, adding the training, adding all the time and energy. We're close to the $18 million. And if we consider adding an hour every bridge, at the bridge, and adding some office time, half an hour per span, half an hour per feature crossed, 1 hour if it's a navigable channel, adding an hour if there's unique pier types, and adding a quarter hour if the bridge is posted, because there's extra ways you have to inventory your posting. If you take all that into effect, you're looking at an extra 2 hours for counties, 3 hours per muni. So you're looking at, this is average. So most of your bridges might be an hour and a half. Some bridges might be 10 hours, depending on how complicated it is. And so it's a big ask. It's on average for the state, it's 3 hours extra per bridge. So if you take 3 hours times your number of bridges, that's how much extra hours you need, not every year, but a one-time for that bridge in the next 4 years to transition to SNBI. And all I've done on this table here is I've taken that number of bridges times average extra hours times $150 per hour to get that $18 million at the bottom. So that's a total guess. But just so you know, there is a total guess, and it's about 3 hours per bridge. It's my goal to take all those heavy, filthy, dirty transition fields and cut down that number of hours as much as possible. So I'm trying to cut that down and make this as straightforward as possible for people to re-inventory their bridges. As I said, this is the 2014 manual. Rest in peace. Don't print off any new ones. We have something on the programmatic for consultant selection. On the January programmatic, we need a consultant that is good at technical writing and a consultant that is aware of the bridge inspection world to do the manual. And I'm recruiting a very small steering committee to make policy decisions for the manual. We're not going to be writing the manual. We're going to be directing the consultant. And this new inspection manual is going to include the inspection, the inventory, the element inventory, the SNBI stuff, and any new policy that's required. So the manual is going to be pretty big, pretty unwieldy, and it will be digital, so it won't seem unwieldy. So here we are in our timeline for dealing with this. We are in the awareness and preparation stage, so congratulate yourself on just showing up to this webinar. This is an important first step to be aware and to begin preparation. In 2023, we are going to have comprehensive training, and we will start implementing. 2024, this is the biggie. Going to start implementing in full force. Every bridge you show up to, you're going to be converting to SNBI. In 2025 and 2026 is when you're going to be churning. You're going to be really implementing target is the end of 2026, so we can make that federal submission on March 15th, 2027. So the question right now is, how do you prepare? You're in the preparation and organization mode right now. How do you prepare? Well, if you're not organized with your plans, get organized. What I mean by plans are bridge plans. Can you get to your bridge plans? Many of you are yes, so that's good. So move to the next one. Take a bridge and try to inventory the bridge with the SNBI and carve out, you and an inspector or inspector in your team, carve out 2 days and just dedicate it to one bridge with the SNBI and practice. See how it goes. See how it goes. If you hear of training, take all the training you can. Take all the training you can on the SNBI. If you look at 2022, June 6th, the regulation is now effective. We are living in the world of the new regulation. It's happened. It's not happening, it's happened. So we're in the grace period to comply. We've got a webinar on the rail standards December 13th, another one on January 25th, and then Valentine's Day is the third webinar. Second half of March in 2023, we're freezing asset-wise, so no new reviewers, no new inspections. We're freezing asset-wise so that we can go live with the RIU and so that we can bulk update data into the SNBI. And then hopefully we have that federal highway training in 2023. As I said, 24, 25, 26 is the big push. June 6th is the deadline, due dates for intervals, qualifications, and manuals. I said at the beginning my disclaimer, I'll say it at the end here, I am not a federal highway employee. I am an Ohio Department of Transportation employee. I am downstream of these decisions, what's in the SNBI and what's in the federal regulation. If you have questions, there is your email address, the NBIS_SNBI_questions@dot.gov. Please ask Federal Highway your questions. My contact is below that, much smaller, so email Federal Highway first. If you'd like some more answers, or this kind of gets you excited, you want to know the gap analysis, what's the difference between the old NBI and the new SNBI, or the old regulation and the new regulation, or if you'd like to watch a Federal Highway webinar, all of that, there's a lot of resources available for you on Federal Highway's website. On the NBIS, it's fhwa.dot.gov/bridge/NBIS 2022. And then you can see the SNBI right there as well. There is a gap analysis on the recording and coding guide versus the SNBI as well. So there's a lot of resources there. What I'd like to do, Paula, I have about 20 questions already asked and already answered. I can click through those pretty quickly. And then I will go through the questions that, if anyone asks any questions, I'll go through those. So all of these questions and answers are in the handout that are available in this webinar. My password expired and I emailed to get a new password, but I have not received a return email back. So I can only access AssetWise through another person's account right now. What should I do? Stop what you're doing. You're not allowed to access AssetWise through another person's account. That's a big no-no. We frown on that. The roles, the security is all put there in place for a reason. Stop doing that. So reach out to Cami in our office. She will set you straight. How extensive is the update to the National Bridge Inventory? It's big, it's massive, and estimate 2 hours per bridge minimum. It's not simple. Next question, is it recommended that everyone attend the new NBIS regulation training and the new SNBI inventory? Yes, these are actual questions we received after this webinar. So yes, Federal Highways promised a training in 2023. Stay tuned for that. We've currently committed to holding monthly webinars December through February. Will ODOT be issuing a new comprehensive inspection manual? The answer is yes. Ideally, we want to be done with that January 2024, to be tuned. I do not know what required courses I will need before June 26, 2024. Okay, I've gotten a lot of these questions and I tend to ignore them. So don't email me these questions. Neither do I. I don't know either. Check what your role is. Are you a program manager or team leader? And compare with what you need. You need a comprehensive training, 18 hours refresher every 60 months. And if you're fracture critical, inspecting fracture critical bridges, you need that class. And if you're a dive inspector, you need the dive class as well. Okay, here is a very long question. I currently fall under the legacy clause. I am not a PE. I'm currently a team leader. It doesn't appear that I will get to keep that role since I'm not a PE. What classes can I take? My level 1 and 2 were taken in 98, 99. Do they count, or will I have to retake? I'm currently the only bridge inspector for my county. Do they need to be finding a PE to replace me? Are you guys hiring a now non-qualified inspector with 25 years experience? What am I supposed to do? Okay, you do not need to be a PE to be a team leader. To maintain your team leader role after June 6, 2024, and your level 1 level, you need a comprehensive class, which sounds like you meet it, and you need 18 hours of refresher training. We're still waiting on what that means, so stay tuned. If you are inspecting fracture critical bridges, you need that fracture critical class. You need to pass that class. So, or the county would have to hire a consultant or hire another county to do those bridges, and if they've taken and passed the class. Next question, can you provide better detail in the 6-month recent field inspection requirement for PMs to be team leaders? What does recent mean? If 6 months of field experience is a requirement, then this will be very difficult for consultants to meet as well. Let's stay tuned. I have the same question. So if you want to be a team leader, you have to, and you have a PE, you have to have 6 months experience to be the team leader. If you want to be a program manager, you don't need field experience. You just need the PE. So you don't need to maintain your program manager status if all you're going to do is stay a program manager. But if you want to be a team leader, you have to get out in the field and inspect. You have 6 months experience. Let's wait on Federal Highway to be the judge there. It's their requirement. Does ODOT provide the NSTM class? Yes, we're working toward teaching this course in 2023 and 2024. We will be looking for a few good inspectors to be guinea pigs, and you get what you pay for. The pilot will be free for some guinea pigs. As a team leader, do I need to take the non-redundant? Yes, if you're doing fracture critical inspections after June 6, 2024. To review those reports as I read the regulation, no. That review is a quality control step that we in Ohio hang our hat on, and you do not need, it's a very good idea to take that class to review the reports, but the federal regulation is to inspect. You need the class. Will the non-redundant steel tension member course be required at any specific frequency, or is taking the class one time enough? It's one and done. One and done. I'm already scheduled for the fracture critical class in November. This is actually, we just had the fracture critical class. I'm up to date on my refresher training. Will the MBIS and SNBI training be included in the upcoming annual refresher training? I would hope that fracture critical class would count as refresher training. I don't know, because Federal Highway needs to be the approver, and I would assume they would, but I'm not promising. Refresher training, the new requirement for refresher training is that 18 hours of training will be required. What is the frequency of this training? Every year, every 5 years? 18 hours every 60 months. It's accumulative. Those of you that have PEs, similar. You have 2 years to get 30 hours. But let's wait for Federal Highway to answer those details. In January 2021, I completed the 7-module LTAP e-learning bridge inspection refresher course. I am unsure of my refresher requirements. Will I need an additional 11 hours before June 2024? Let me hide that answer. That is not correct. You will not need an additional 11 hours before June 6, 2024. After June 7th, 2024, you will need 18 hours of refresher training. So that midnight of that day is when you need the 18 hours every 60 months. So you will need something extra after June 6, 2020. So that answer is not exactly correct. Hopefully you can correct that on your slide you have. This is slide 65. After June 6, 2024, will refresher training be 18 hours in addition to the current 5-year refresher training requirement? The latter. The 5-year refresher training requirement is an Ohio requirement. Federal Highway is now the captain, and they require 18 hours every 60 months. More refresher training questions. Does the NHI fracture critical or NSTM course count towards refresher training? I hope so. I don't know. Federal Highway has the approval authority, and hopefully they let us know. My current refresher training expires in 23. I took a non-redundant steel tension member class by ODOT, and I am a PE. Do I have to do the NHI class? What NHI class? You will need 18 hours of approved, Federal Highway approved refresher training every 60 months starting June 6, 2024. That's all I got. Up until 2024, you do need refresher training to get to June 6, 2024. Another refresher training course question. I took the online module courses last year. How many hours of training do these count as? 6 hours. You can't take it twice and get 12. So it's a 6-hour one and done. My current refresher will run out soon. After the cutoff date, will there be any grace period? This is the grace period. You are living in the grace period. So you got to take refresher training before June 6, 2024 if you need 18 hours every 60 months. And I took the ODOT offered online refresher course in 2021. Does this count for the new implementation? No. It will get you to June 6, 2024, but not after. You need how many hours? 18 hours every 60 months. Again, you're going to have to wait for Federal Highway to answer this, or just ask them. Ask them. They want to be the approvals. They can decide. All right, last question. Thanks for holding on. What is RIU? RIU is a roadway inventory updater. We take roadway inventory data and paste it into AssetWise. We only paste it into AssetWise if 5 fields are saying the same thing. Latitude, longitudes on the route number, matching the county log within I think 65 feet. There's 5 fields it has to match. And if you get those 5 fields right, it will add in 20 extra roadway fields, such as some of the hard ones like the hard fields like ADT, future ADT, those kind of fields. If any one of those 5 fields don't jive, then no data gets patched in. So those fields will remain blank. So blank is bad. Blank means there's a conflict between those 5 fields. If you want to know more information about RIU, go into any bridge detail screen and click on that form, RIU. You'll learn more about RIU. Also on the NBI form, there's some data. There's some text at the bottom right-hand form within AssetWise, the NBI form, about what RIU is and what it isn't. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to click back to the contact screen, so I have that up, and I've got some questions. Okay. Will the 6-day, this is from James, will the 6-day level 1, level 2, 2 times 3 days count as comprehensive bridge inspection training after 2024? Yes. Yes, James, you're good. Will the old fracture critical class circa 2014 still count? Yes, that class is one and done. I took that class in 2003, and I don't need to take it again. I did, but I don't need to take it again. So that is a one and done class. I plan to create a new role in AssetWise for those that have taken the class, and that team leader will be able to update the fracture critical condition code, fracture critical yes or no code, fracture critical date code. So there's maybe a handful of codes that that new role will be able to edit, and that's how we plan on managing through role security. Good questions, Joe. Joe, are you documenting continuing ed? How we plan on documenting, we are currently. It is a heavy task to go through every single certificate. We will develop some sort of procedure. It's very similar to what we have now, but we need to improve it somehow, where we make sure that everybody has refresher training and everybody has the comprehensive class, and we link that to the role security. We go through that annual process that is, what do we call that? The asset-wise account verification procedure, where we give you 2 months to respond back whether or not your role is different. The short answer is yes. I don't know how we're going to do that yet. We're documenting role security, which one of them would be team leader and program manager, but to be determined. Terry, will the previous level 1 and level 2 bridge inspection class count towards the new requirements? Yes. Yes, if you took at somewhere the late, the only thing that doesn't count, and we've contacted everyone that kind of fits this, the only thing that doesn't count is that people that have roles that are team leader or program manager that are using the legacy clause checklist. So we've emailed and reached out to every one of you that have used that and relying on that for your role secure, for your team leader or program manager role in AssetWise. If you haven't heard from us and you have a level 1 certificate in AssetWise and a level 2 certificate in AssetWise, and you're currently approving reports or currently creating reports and you have no hangups, you're going to be okay. You will not need to sit through 2 weeks of this voice. Sean, I'm seeing NHI fracture critical training available on Federal Highway's website, but seeing nothing on LTAP's website. Any reason for this not showing up there? My guess, Sean, is that the NHI site has every other state in the country, and there's been a few times where a consultant has hosted a fracture critical class in Ohio, but more than likely it's another state. Fracture critical, there's one on March 14th. I guess I'll have to look into that. I think that class, that might be the 1 week for PE class, the one in Akron. Yeah, we'll follow up, Sean. LTAP's on the line. We'll follow up and make sure those are matching the NHI website. If we do offer any NHI classes, we meaning ODOT, we go through LTAP. LTAP's excellent at administering and communicating and registering. So if there's another entity, I guess there's a chance they could host it. A county engineer, CAO could host NHI class. They need a building, so anybody can host it. So maybe they snuck in another way, but we'll follow up and look into that. Matt, will I be notified when I need additional training, or will that be on each person to monitor? It is your responsibility. I think what we're going to do is quality control as far in advance as possible. That's what we're gonna do. So we will try to let you know, and we'll certainly let you know we'll let you know what's in AssetWise every summer when we send out the account reconciliation requests. So you'll be able to see what's in AssetWise and what we don't have, but it is on you. Carl, you want to be you're in. How do you become a guinea pig for NSTM training? Wait until we decide we're going to do it. And Jared's going to be the point person for that class. So you could throw your hat in, you're throwing your hat in the ring right now as a guinea pig. It's a good class. If you take the fracture critical class, it is how to read the fatigue category table in the back of the LRFD manual. So if you ever wanted to be fluent in that table, it's a 3.5-day class. It's a pretty good trade-off. I think I've got to the end of my questions, Paula. I guess in closing, again, I just want to reiterate my intent is, I mean, it's just a lot. You just got shot with a fire hose of information. And I don't want to overwhelm. I do want to communicate what's in the SNBI though. And hopefully it was a helpful use of your time. And if you have questions, again, this is federal highway driven, but at ODOT, we are trying to make decisions to help implement. So if you have questions for federal highway, reach out to federal highway directly. If you have questions on how Ohio is implementing, you can certainly reach out to me. Email is probably best. As a side note, we do have a new federal bridge engineer. His name is Serge, and assistant bridge engineer is Alexis. So you can reach out to them, find their contact online, and reach out to them directly. They're helpful as well. So again, thanks for your time. Thanks for hanging in there for a long, full 90 minutes here, full hour. Yeah, a little more than an hour. And you can have the rest of your day back. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.